Hello, people. How are you today? I spent a long day yesterday giving myself self-care. And it sounded like a good idea to give myself a huge amount of sitting. But that was not really, that might have been what my brain said to do, and my mind was very happy to do. But in point of fact, as it turned out, my body was not that happy to spend time yesterday doing as much sitting as I did. So today we're really going to focus on the work that undoes sitting. And Janet, if that's you, then this will only help your walking to be even of better quality. Because when we sit, we've talked about this because it so implicates our abdominal health. When we sit, right, we're bringing all these bones closer together. And because we bring these bones closer together, they adapt to like to live closer together. And then we stand up and we end up with something that can be kind of like this, or kind of like this, or our knees stay really soft, or we have ongoing problems with our feet. So that's what we're going to focus on today, because that's what I need more than anything else. For today's class, you're going to want to grab your books that you use as yoga blocks. You're going to want to have your towel that you may use to prop yourself close by. You may want to be near a chair or a wall so that you can use that to help you with balance. I'm going to use a roller so I can stay in front of the camera and not have to adjust it a lot. And eventually we will use the things that we use to bolster ourselves so that we can keep our head and our shoulders elevated. And I want to get right to it because I'm still going to have to end on time, and I want everyone to have good work. So grab your towel and roll it up in such a way that it approximates my half dome. And let's just take a moment and stand up and just, let's take a deep breath. Just remind ourselves, whatever's happening outside, I have a lot of chaos outside this room. We're just going to be present and we're going to be here. And we're just going to take some deep breaths. Feel your feet be in the ground. Feel your toes. Hopefully you're barefoot. Definitely no socks, right? We want to have as much connection to the ground as we can have. If feet are an issue for you, socks or shoes, and you have to wear them, that's okay, but recognize that that's going to be implicating the whole structure and how you connect with the ground. Stand as tall as you can and see what happens. Are the shoulders coming up around your ears? Can you keep the shoulders relaxed? And simply pull the rib cage farther away from the pelvis. Notice if that helps you find your abdominals just a little bit, right? If you do that, can you take a deep breath while staying long and tall? Take one more deep breath. Let's just take a second. Let's reach the right arm up to the ceiling. I just want you to reach as far up towards the ceiling as you can. Notice, does that make you feel like you have to jut the hip out, or can you keep the legs really grounded as you reach? And then we'll do the other side. Just noticing how our body shifts and changes. I already feel a little bit better just for having lengthened my body. Let's come on to the half dome with our right foot. Our left foot will be off to the side. And just get a sense at first of what happens when you bring your foot up. Do you have to fold forward? Right? If you fold forward, some of what that's telling you is that the back of the leg and the hip flexors have gotten a little tight. So now you know something about how you're living. And our body gets really good at what we do and adapts to what we do. So if you've been doing doing a lot of sitting, likely the calves have gotten a little tight. And we're just going to start to walk with the foot that's not on the half dome. We're just going to check out what happens as we do that. Can we stay stacked and back over our pelvis as we step the foot forward? The half dome in this position is approximating the angles that the ankle and the leg would need to take in order to walk uphill. Subsequently or consequently, the high-heeled shoe is often approximating for people what it means to walk downhill, right? Because you're always tilted just a little bit. And so if walking downhill bothers your knees or your hips, likely you've adjusted to your shoes and are now even having a harder time loading the knees and the hips to be able to take a hill. We're just going to do a couple more. My calf already feels better. We're going to drop the left leg backwards, and we're just going to bend both knees and kind of lift through the legs up towards the ceiling. You should find a secondary stretch in the calf that's a little bit different than the stretch you got when you first stepped onto your bolster. Just take some deep breaths and give these muscles permission to stretch longer. Check in with your knees as you're doing this, right? You want to make sure that when you look down, your knees are staying hip distance apart, right? We don't want the knees turning inward. If they turn inward, that's an interesting thing to notice. And you can let me know after class, and then that will help me better inform me about what I can offer to you tomorrow. Just take another deep breath here. And just stand up and then assess for a moment. I already feel much more grounded in my right leg. I kind of feel like my left side is lifted and not as grounded. So I'm not only feeling the ground better, but I feel a little bit taller. So let's go ahead and bring our leg onto the wedge or the bolster on the left leg. Just take a second and see how that feels. I'm going to make sure that my feet are hip distance apart and that my feet are straight. So for those of you who might be new watching the videos, let me just review while everybody else is up on the half dome. Your feet straight ahead would be able to, let me see if I can see. Yep, I'm going to move this down just a little bit. Your feet straight ahead, if you put a straight edge up against the foot, your foot straight ahead would be with the straight edge up against the pinky and the heel up against the bolster as well. For most of you, that's going to feel like you're a bit pigeon-toed. That's okay. I'm not going to go into today. Let's go ahead and travel with this left leg. I'm not going to go in today the consequences of why the heel likes to do that and what's happening in the foot. But if I need to review it, let me know. And I'm just going to pick up my camera a little bit so that you can see that as I travel with the right leg now, what I'm trying to do is keep my body upright as I go, right? If I bent forward when I got my foot up on the half dome, then I would travel in a smaller way, right? I talk a lot about in the work that we've done over the last few years about what it means to load our muscles, our joints, and our bones. Really important loading for our bones because that's what signals our bones to grow stronger, right? So if you find that you have a weakness in your bones, some of what we need is more load, right? Which is why they talk about weight-bearing exercise. But there's some load to our muscles and our bones just from holding ourselves upright against gravity. The problem, as you know from watching me for a while, is that often we stop holding ourselves appropriately in gravity. And that means that those bones aren't getting signaled constantly and consistently over time. and they also become weaker. We'll just do a couple more here on the left foot. See how that feels. We'll take our right foot backwards, feet straight ahead, knees straight ahead, and we'll soften the knees and lift through the legs towards the back, just to get that secondary stretch. Make sure you keep breathing. If you hold your breath, that's something interesting to share with me, because holding your breath is not necessary, but a lot of us grip or bear down or tense up when we try to do an exercise. It's kind of better to think of these things as body exploration movements. Exercise is a very narrow range of motions, and although we are working very specific sets of muscles, we're doing that so that when we walk and when we do move, our joints and our bones are able to take the load and are adaptive enough. So for example, let's say you trip. You're out walking and you trip and you fall. How well is the ankle adaptive enough so that it can take whatever's happened in your falling and twisting it without breaking, right? Without tearing something. These movements will enhance the adaptive ability of the muscles and joints. Okay, let's go ahead and stand up and see how that feels. Already I'm feeling more grounded when I stand instead of standing like I usually do, which is a little forward in my feet. I feel like I'm already adjusted to be back in my heel better. My pubic bone and my hip bone are happy to be stacked. My chest is a little lifted as I look and assess. It could be a little bit better stacked over my pelvis, but pretty much from the heel up, I feel relatively stacked back in my heel, which of course loads the whole leg with gravity better. We're going to go ahead and do a double calf stretch now. That was a single calf. You'll remember that these are on the handout I've posted to the group under files, right? These are the gait mechanic pieces of work. I'm going to use a half dome for this. You can do it flat. So take a second. Let's just see what happens. We'll take a second and we're going to fold at the hip, right? We don't want to fold in the upper body. That's not really stretching our legs. We want to take the top of the hamstrings, which are in our tushy, and the bottom of the hamstrings, which is down at the heel, right? The hamstrings actually only go to the knee, but there's a line of energy all the way up the back of the leg, right? So we're going to just see when we fold forward, how horizontal can we get the pelvis vis-a-vis the leg, right? Optimally, we would want to get the pelvis into neutral, folded forward. And then, as you know, we would push back just a little bit because that pulls the pelvis in the same angle farther from the heel. Lift the toes and make sure that you're not pushed forward in some way. If you were to find this not so challenging, the next step up from this, and you're going to see really quickly how tight my hamstrings are, you could use your bolster, have both feet on the bolster, and then fold forward. And you're going to notice a much more intense stretch, but that's kind of what I want today. I'm ready to turn on my legs. So again, I fold forward, I check in with my pelvis, and I push back just a bit. Check in, just as you're hanging out here and breathing, and see if to do this, you have bent your elbows and are trying to get your head closer to the surface in front of you. What I would tell you is that you may be sensing a better stretch, or a more intense stretch. Better is the wrong word. A more intense stretch. But now you're doing something in the spine. It doesn't necessarily mean you've lifted the tush any higher. So go ahead and reach back with one hand if you can. Kind of goose yourself a little bit and grab hold of the tailbone and lift the tushy as much as it can towards the ceiling with your hand. What you're going to notice is you only folded forward just enough, and there's probably a little bit more in there. In this position, optimally, we would not be thrusting the chest, right? We would have the ribs lined up with the pelvis in whatever line you're creating. So as you notice, I'm at an angle in my upper body, and that's because that's where my pelvis will let it go. If I could fold my pelvis more, then my chest obviously would come closer to the surface in front of me. Just take a couple more deep breaths. Some of you may be feeling a bit of strain or stretch in the lumbar, right? The biggest contributing factor I see in my practice for lumbar health is tension in the hamstrings. So if the hamstrings and your low back are talking to each other, in some ways that's a good thing. It's kind of connecting your brain to the fact that the legs need to be longer in order to give the pelvis the positioning that it needs. We'll take one more deep breath here. Excellent. Let's go ahead and step back and see how you're feeling now. How does it feel to stand back in the heels now? You may find that all of a sudden you kind of are getting a sense of what it feels like to have the gluteals begin to hold you up, right? That would be really nice. I used to have a really, really flat tush, but just living back in my heels and working hard to walk and stay back in my heels is actually all you need to get your gluteals to do what gluteals are supposed to do. You're going to stay ponied up to the surface that's in front of you, but this time you're going to spread the feet straight ahead, wider than hip distance, so that you're more like at an angle. I'm going to do it this way actually because I think you'll be able to see. We're going to fold forward like we did just a moment ago in the double calf stretch, but this time we're going to kind of give the hips some love, and we're going to shift our pelvis and all our weight over into the left leg. You may feel a stretch in the inner thigh of the right. You're definitely going to feel grounded in the left. Go ahead and lift up the toes so you know that you didn't kind of push forward into the feet. And just notice how it feels to be truly, completely grounded in weight into the left leg. There may be, I feel like a deep bone sensation, like my leg isn't stretching nearly as much as it feels loaded. Check in with the kneecaps. See if in this position you can bob the kneecaps up and down. Often when we sit a lot, the quadriceps get tight, and when quadriceps get tight, they pull the kneecap into the joint, which is not great for joint health. It's one of the reasons we do a lot of stretching for the quads. Inhale and exhale, and then we're going to go ahead and take this stretch to the other side, right? Now, check in with your pelvis. If I have a surface in front of me, then often what happens is, and you can see it happened for me. Well, maybe not, I don't know if you can see it, but I'm going to tell you about it anyway. My right hip is pushed forward. It is not parallel to what would be in front of me. And that tells me that I kind of do this, yeah? That's okay, it's not bad. But for this particular stretch, we want to keep our pelvis parallel to the surface that we might be leaning on. So go ahead and straighten out the hips and just give a little check so that you can see. Lift up the toes, make sure you're still back in the heels, and let's come back to the left and see, did the pelvis travel over the legs without shifting from side to side? Did it stay square? Oh, I just got a huge release behind my knee in my left leg. Deep breaths. And we'll come back into the right leg, staying in the left, not as long as the first time. Grounding the right leg, taking deep breaths. Feel the flow of energy. It's a stretch for sure. You should be feeling something up the back of the right leg. You may be feeling a different kind of sensation. I think of that as my bone experiencing what it's like to truly be loaded with all of my weight. You may feel a stretch to the inside of the thigh. Janet, if you end up feeling a big stretch to the inside of the thigh, let me know after class. I'm thinking about the insides of your knees, and I want to make sure that you're okay. Couple more deep breaths. Excellent. Gently help yourself up because you are bent over. And again, just kind of get a sense of your legs. How do they feel now? My legs feel much more alive, like I gave them a good amount of attention. I feel grounded, and yet it's easy to keep my upper body stacked over my legs now, which is really nice. We're going to maintain the same position for a moment, but this time we're going to stretch the upper body. Thoracic spine, a lot of people have been talking about neck and shoulder tension. I have a lot of people in my practice right now who are experiencing neck issues. This part of your spine, right through here, is what's designed to take the weight of your big bowling ball, 16-pound, 13-pound head on top of this very narrow neck-like structure. And so if you keep your shoulder blades really together, and that's one of the reasons, I'm going to come down so that you can really see my back. If my shoulder blades are always like this, then my spine is forward. If my shoulder blades are wide, you can see that my spine moves towards the back. So if your shoulder blades like to live really close together, you may be finding that you have a lot of neck and tension. And it really is this part of the spine that needs to be in the right place so that the head knows where to sit, right? If you're somebody who slumps over like this a lot and you bring your shoulder blades together, then the head really doesn't have the right place in knowing where to come back and sit. So we're going to go ahead and have the surface in front of us. We're going to bend forward again, but this time, I'm going to move my surface forward. This time we're going to back up enough that we can let the top part of our body hang through our arms. Yeah, so you're just going to relax and release the upper part of the spine between the arms. And breathe deeply into your ribs if you can. If in this position your legs are too tight for you to feel much movement in the spine, go ahead and bend the knees just a little bit. We really want to give the upper spine some love here. And so that's more important. And I was going to say trumps the legs, but I don't think I want to say that right now. Take some deep breaths. See if you can feel the ribs move underneath the armpits as you breathe. Can you let the head and the sternum drop towards the floor? You're going to go ahead now and you're going to walk your arms over to the left. I'm going to move my bolster. And what we're doing now is we're keeping the pelvis squared and straight to the surface in front of us. And we're curving the upper back and spine so that the right side of our ribs is long and rounded. The left rib has come a little bit closer to the hip. And now we're just going to see if by bringing our mind's eye into the right ribs, we can stretch there. We can breathe into our right rib. So kind of put aside your lack of faith and have faith that if you bring your mind's eye into the right rib, you will feel it move more. I'm going to shut up for a second and take a couple deep breaths myself. The head and the sternum are continuing to drop. The pelvis is staying square to the surface in front of you. Take one more deep breath, and then we'll walk the hands over to the right side. So now the hands are over at the right side. The pelvis is still square to the surface in front of us. And now we can breathe into the left rib, taking the sternum, the chest, down towards the floor with the head, breathing into the left ribs. See if you can create any movement there. one more deep breath and then come back to center. Again, just see, did you pick up any additional movement in the head and in the chest, being able to drop towards the floor? Maybe if you had your knees bent, maybe now's the time to straighten them and see if you can have this position happen, but with straight legs. I like to think about my spine and my tailbone kind of starting a cascade like a waterfall down towards the floor. Excellent. Gently, very slowly, help yourself back up. You've been bent over for a little bit and the blood is going to rush to your head just a bit. Excellent. So how does that feel? I already feel a little bit more lifted in my chest. I really am in touch now with a feeling in my spine. And my head even feels as if it is happy to grow taller and keep me tall and at length. So I hope that that's what you found as well. We're going to go ahead now and come down and just check in with our hip flexors. If you want to grab a towel for underneath your knees, we're going to be on the knees for a little bit. I have carpeting here, and it bothers my knees to be into just the carpet. You're going to bring your left leg onto the towel. We're going to bring our right leg out a little bit farther away than 90 degrees. Take your right hand and bring it to the inside of your right leg. I'm going to actually do it this way because I want you to be able to see. So if I bring my hand to the inside of my right leg by applying a little pressure into the knee and with my hand and then my knee into my hand, I create a bit of counter pressure, which gives me a little bit more stability here. Okay, so check. You came into this position. How far forward is your rib cage from your pelvis? We're really intent on, in this position, stretching the front of the hip flexor as well as the thigh. And in order to do that well, we're going to keep the chest stacked over the pelvis. We want to make sure we use just the right muscles. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to tuck the pelvis, which brings my pubic bone just a little forward of my hip bones. Instead of being in neutral, I've tucked. For some, that may be all it takes to feel the stretch through the hip flexor and the thigh. If you need a bit more of a stretch, we're going to use the right leg that's into the floor, and we're going to lunge, quote unquote, into it. But we're not going to lunge with the chest because that's not really doing anything for our hip flexors. We're going to stay tucked. And if our pelvis moves us forward, then the ribs can come too, right? What you're feeling is this bone, the thigh bone, pushing forward into the bowl of the pelvis. And we want that hip flexor to stop liking being short and bent. And so a hip flexor stretch and a quad stretch is actually really nice. This is predominantly for the hip flexors because we're constantly bringing our thigh closer to the pelvis when we sit. And so this is the opposite of that. Just take one or two more deep breaths. Excellent. Let's go and we'll do the other side. So we'll bring our right knee into the bolster or into the towel. I like to plant my foot, my toes into the floor. That is not a requirement. You can do it either way. It gives me a little bit more stability and I don't want to fall over on camera. Which has happened. It's happened. Okay, remember we're going to tuck the tush so that our pubic bone is just a little forward of our hip bone. And then if we can, we will push forward into the left leg, but only so much as we can keep the ribs stacked over the pelvis. Breathe and just take a moment to see, are there any parts of you that you're throwing at this little piece of work that don't need to be using as much energy as they are using. See if you can relax into the stretch of this rather than gripping into the stretch of this. We'll take a couple more breaths. Excellent. That's really nice for the hip flexors. How do your hip flexors feel? Awesome. All right. Go ahead and grab the book, the block, whatever you're using. And again, you might want to pony up to a surface so that you feel stabilized. When we sit, right, this is all about undoing sitting. When we sit, not only do we bring bones closer together, but we often have a tendency to, without knowing it, internally rotate the thighs so that when you stand up with your legs straight, pointed straight ahead, you may feel very bow-legged. And that may be an indication that when you sit with the knees kind of together. That unfortunately means that the outside of the leg is not getting the constant and consistent load that it needs, and it grows weaker because it's not in the right position. And so we're going to work on that with a movement that we call pelvic listing. So we're going to come and bring our foot onto whatever we're using as a lift. You may be using a book. You're going to line the outside edge of the foot with the outside edge of whatever you're standing on. Come and stand on it, right? Again, feel free to use a wall or a chair or whatever it is that you have. It's not that important. And we just want to see what happens when we drop the right leg towards the floor. Notice when I do that, my left hip is kind of pushing out. It's not staying underneath me. It's taking the load poorly. So I'm going to adjust that by pulling my left leg in, and then I'm only going to allow my right hip to drop as much as I can keep my left hip from dropping out. I'm going to do this in the easiest way without even taking my right foot off the floor. I'm just going to send the heel down closer to the floor, and then I'm going to come up on my toes. Some of what this area needs is both strength and flexibility. And so we're experiencing both of those now to see how much can the thigh bone kind of sink into the pelvis here. If you want to make it harder, you can lift up and off. So we've gotten a bit of this stretch. Now, to get the right foot to lift up, instead of hiking the hip, I want you to try to push the left leg down into the surface it's standing on. And what you may notice is that energy of pushing downward is all it takes to get the right leg to have some room to lift. That in essence is what we should be doing when we walk, though we often don't feel the ground below us enough to remember that walking is about pushing away from the ground with the foot. Just do a couple more. And then we'll step off and just see how one leg feels from the other. I am tired, and my left hip was saying, please, please, Sam, stop, stop. Let's do the right leg. Let's bring the outside of the right foot on top of our book or our block, whatever you're using. Let's come and let's just see what happens when we try to move up and down. Does the right leg want to pop out like mine's doing? Okay, let's squeeze the right leg in underneath us, and then let's play with that, right? This keeps us, I often refer to this is the edge of my work, where it's taking work to hold my positioning. I'm not in any pain, but I'm not moving poorly either, right? You'll notice my left leg isn't moving as much as it did when I was doing this. That's my left leg moving is not as important in this moment, right? We're trying to build up the musculature on the outside. you may quickly start to feel the outside of the leg. We've actually been using it in a lot of the exercises we've done today. And most of us don't have the strength and stamina to maintain those things. Okay, let's try now. We've given this some love. Try now to push the right leg down into the block to get the left leg to lift, right? Walking is a one-legged activity. So in order to walk well, we need strength and balance on one leg so that the other leg can swing from behind to the front, right? Often we don't even realize that we're not using the right muscles or the right parts of ourselves to move ourselves forward. Just do a couple more and see how that feels. Okay, go ahead and help yourself down and see how your legs and your hips feel. I feel kind of warmed up all the way up into my pelvis. I definitely am feeling my glutes, which is interesting because you wouldn't have thought based on what we were doing that I used my glutes that much, but in point of fact, standing appropriately, standing well, using your legs well, always uses the glutes. It's just that we don't tend to do that, and so we like to think of the glutes turning on and feeling like really, really locked. But that just means that the muscle fibers are completely contracted, right? That's called gripping. That's not called force generation, right? A muscle generates force when it's in motion, not when it's all the way locked up. Yeah? Okay. Let's go ahead and help ourselves down onto the floor. Go ahead and grab the strap that you're using, the rope that you're using, whatever you're using to support your leg when we do this kind of work. You might have a rope, pantyhose, leggings, scarf, any of those things would be okay. I'm going to go ahead and use my yoga strap. There's a small muscle before we get down. There's a small muscle that goes from the outside to the inside of the knee. I like its name, so I always share it. It's called the popliteus. Isn't that fun? Say that, popliteus. Because our knees are bent so much because we sit, that poor little muscle's adapted itself. It has shortened for us, for our benefit, so that sitting is made easier. It's really important that we get that guy to signal so that he knows that we would like him to also be able to straighten. And that way when you stand up, that soft knee isn't maintained. You actually can straighten your legs. So you're going to gently help yourself down onto your bolster, however you've arranged that. Your knees can be bent, right? Just check in. Take a deep breath. In this position with your knees bent, the legs are not creating an energy that might take the whole body up this way, yeah? So see with your knees bent how much of your spine can actually live in the floor. We've deliberately lifted the shoulders and the head off of the floor, the bed, or whatever it is you're lying on. And what we'd like optimally is for the bottom rib, the pelvis to be in neutral and the bottom rib to be comfortably into the floor, yeah? That's how we know that our abs will be muscularly and structurally in the right position to do the work that we're going to do. You're going to go ahead and take your strap, left leg down into the floor, right foot into the strap. See, I always set myself up wrong and then you can't see. Straighten the leg into the strap. And what I want you to see, I'm going to hold my leg higher than you should. We want to pull the toes back towards us while the heel extends away from us. Can you see? I'm really flattening my foot, and I'm using the strap to help me do that. I'm lowering my leg as far as I need to put my left leg flat into the floor. Optimally, your left leg would not be floating off the floor in this position. It would be grounded into the floor and relaxed. You're going to ask the heel, the foot, the leg in fact, even the whole hip and tushy, to pull down away from the rib cage so that we can create as much length as possible. Pretty quickly, you probably felt a stretch into the back of the knee. Take some deep breaths and talk to your little popliteus. Ask it to please accommodate you by deciding that actually being longer would be a better idea. You'd like to have straight legs. We'll take a couple more deep breaths here. We'll cross the right foot over the left ankle, staying exactly where it is. We just kind of moved it over across the body. And now you're likely feeling a stretch behind the knee again, but it might include a little bit of the right hip. That would be completely appropriate here. Just breathe into that and see if you can allow the stretch and everything to lengthen. The whole hip is pulling away from the rib cage. The back of the knee is talking to you. The calf is talking to you. Maybe even the foot and the ankle are talking to you. That's okay. One more deep breath. And then we'll just relax the right leg down into the floor. In this way, we're teaching the brain to help us not only with the left side, but to remind you later that there's a benefit to what we've done, right? Your right leg probably feels longer than your left leg. Let's go ahead and take the left side. Again, we'll pull the toes back towards the face, sending the heel, right? The toes are coming back towards us. The heel is driving away. It's happening all the way from up here because the leg inserts itself way up here. So we actually want the whole tushy cheek to pull long away from the rib cage on the left. You might want to squeeze and relax your quadricep just a little bit and see, are you squeezing the quad? Is the quad trying to jump in to do this work? It's not necessary. The back of the leg and your arms and the strap hopefully have the strength that they need to maintain this position. So see, you can let the leg be heavy in the strap. Kind of ask the quad not to join this little party as much. Last deep breath here. We'll take the left leg across the right ankle, pulling the left leg long, all the way from the tushy cheek. Letting the back of the knee stretch, letting the calf stretch. You may even feel a bit in the left hip. We worked on the hip quite a bit, or more than usual today. Yeah. Take one more deep breath here. And we'll relax the left leg into the floor. Ooh, that feels nice. Okay, it's time for the big one. I'm going to bring you a different quad stretch today. We're already on the ground. You're going to go ahead and grab your towel, whatever you're using, and just roll it up so it's kind of like this. Yeah? You may want your strap for this. My son is always saying that I have orangutan arms, that they're really, really long. You may want to use your strap. We are going to come down onto our belly, and you are going to put this bolster right underneath your hip bones in such a way. Can you see my pubic bone can drop towards the floor even though my hip bones are lifted? Yeah? This is going to get us into the quad in a really strong way. You can lower your body down onto the floor so that you can rest your head into your upper arms. And now we're going to lift up the right leg. And if you can, grab it with your hand. If you want to grab the toes, that's okay. Better to grab the ankle. You also can use a strap to hold the leg. And as soon as you pull it towards your tush, you're likely going to feel a pretty good stretch. Try to send the knee down away from the body towards where the foot would land. And just breathe. Go ahead and allow the body to stretch that way. Allow the quad to release. Take the foot And go ahead and bring it more towards your sacrum or your butt crack. Take some deep breaths. Take the leg wide and out to the other side. Notice, do you feel a difference depending on where the foot is as to how much stretch you can feel? Relax the leg to the ground. We're going to go ahead and take the other side. We're going to bend the left leg, and we're going to bring it as high up as we can. If you're holding on to the ankle, you can flex the foot. It can be with no energy. If you're holding on to the toes, you're going to be pointing your foot a bit. Just recognize, what does it take for you to be able to find the stretch in your quad? For me, I need to flex my foot. Go ahead and take the foot now over the sacrum, over your tushy crack, and see what that does. That likely is externally rotating your thigh a bit. And as that's a more natural position, you can go ahead and take it wide and see what happens. Optimally, the position would be able to be accommodated wherever the foot would land itself. So maybe you notice something about yourself that you can share with me later. Take a couple more deep breaths and then relax the foot to the floor. And gently help yourself up into a seated position. I know we were a little shorter on time today, and I apologize. I won't back my clients up back to back and around our time. I'll be a little bit more conscientious of our time. Just take a moment, see how you feel. I feel as if my body has warmed up a lot. I feel as if I am able to sit a little bit taller than I was when I came in. I don't feel like it's a challenge to sit up through my tush and sit up really tall. Just kind of notice what you feel in your body and let me know so that I can help kind of tweak things. I know we've been apart for 3 days now, and so likely you did all sorts of things. Maybe you sat a lot, and so what you noticed was that sitting didn't make your body feel that great. So these are the movements to focus on and work on most. If you found yourself sitting a lot, slowly it will start to lengthen the muscles that are used to being very bent. And you will find you have longer legs, stronger legs, and the walking that many of you are doing will be much more productive. I was reading a lot on the lymphatic system over the weekend and about the fact that the core and the calf are really important for pumping the lymphatic system. So practice your rib breathing and using the abdominals to breathe, because that would mean that the abdominals are moving all day, every day. And keep practicing on your double calf and your single calf stretches so that when you walk, the calf and the foot can do their job and help your lymphatic system pump better. Okay, Janet, I think you're the only one there, so I love you lots, and I promise that tomorrow will be a lengthier session. Okay, bye.